Welcome to Choose Views with Richard Chew. Get ready to dive into a world of insightful conversations and thought-provoking discussions.
As progressives, our job is to have an all-inclusive, full-on assault with all of our players.
A show that will focus on moving our political, social, economic, gender, and cultural conversation forward.
And all of our players means all of our players.
It's Choose Views. And now, here's your host, Richard Chew.
Good Thursday morning, progressives. Welcome to the April 3rd, 2025 edition of Choose Views, 773-763-9278. Catch us on Facebook Live, TuneIn Radio, YouTube, and iHeartRadio. Definitely email me at richard@wcpt820.com. Catch me on Substack. And, you know, guys, I know that we've had some wonderful clips this week that Devin and Henry and I put together, and thanks to those guys. If there's clips that I haven't gotten to you, just send me an email reminder. I apologize if I haven't gotten those to you. But definitely catch all of our shows, as always, by subscribing to our WCPT podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. There you can get, of course, Choose Views, short versions and long versions. Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, driving it home with Patty Vasquez. The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath, Out Chicago, and our other great shows and interviews. Check out our heartlandsignal.com digital platform. That's the place where all the good stuff is. And speaking of Joan, today, live, local, and progressive, Joan is back. And our guests are Pat Creetlow, founder and editor of Up North News, Democratic lawyer Michael Dorf, and allergist and immunologist Zachary Rubin, MD. Live, local, and progressive, that's Joan Esposito today between 2 and 5. Tonight, driving it home with Patty Vasquez. She'll be joined by guest host Chris Jones, and their guests include Reed McCullum, chair of the Democratic Party of DuPage County. And they got it done out in DuPage County as they did up in McHenry County. Sarah Garzik-Resnick, CEO of Personal PAC, will be with Patty. But yeah, the Dems in DuPage and McHenry County. Shout out to Natalie Ziemba, councilwoman up there. They got it done. And these local county elections and local elections in different states in different parts of the country that really got the work done. So kudos to the heads of those different Democratic Party groups and county groups. Tomorrow is first Friday of the month, April 4th. That means Mayor Brandon Johnson will be here back on Choose Views for this month with the mayor segment at 7:30. So looking forward to that. And our wonderful friend Karen Byrne from True Blue Politics podcast will be here as well in the 6:30 hour. So make your way, as always, over to heartlandsignal.com. And a little bit of a surprise today for those of you who want to be in the know. Joan Esposito is going to be joining us, Henry. I know, in the 6:30 hour. Joan and I are going to have a little bit of fun chatting about a really cool event that she went to, and I don't want to spoil it too much. But it is tied to a very important conversation that we have to have about the cuts that the Trump administration is making that are impacting all of us in one way or another. It's the old phrase, 6 degrees of separation is down to 2 and 1 for so many people. And the one, and Joan and I'll talk about this, the one that's a big one, and I've said this to so many people, Henry, when we've been talking about how someone, you, me, and 5 other people can be walking down the street, we're all breathing the same air. Okay? And that's tied to our climate. And this administration is definitely asleep at the wheel, if not directly, I would say, and Joan would probably say as well, directly attacking our environment with the cuts that they've made. And so we're going to talk with Joan about an event she attended yesterday with the great Tom Skilling, talking about climate change and the attack on Weather Service and NOAA. So when Joan's with us at 6:30, we'll get into that. So excited to chat with her. We also today have CTU President Stacey Davis Gates. They made some positive moves in terms of the budget and the agreement that they put together, and we'll talk about that. And then in the 7:30 hour, Pat Devaney of the Illinois AFL-CIO We Are One coalition will be talking about the importance of what's going on with unions. And we have a clip that I believe Henry put together from a woman speaking at Sarah Nelson. Do we have that one available? We'll probably want to play after we talk to Stacey Davis Gates, because both of these are union strong people. Stacey is, Miss Gates, I should say, and Pat Devaney are. So we'll probably want to get that one in because she really brings the heat, meaning Sarah Nelson, in talking about the importance of having strong unions in America. So today we've got 3 powerhouse people that are going to be with us. Starting off with Joan, it's in the 6:30 hour, and then Miss Gates, and then Pat Devaney. So I'm looking forward to talking with each of the 3 of them. And also today, guys, make sure that you're staying plugged in, as I always say, obviously to Joan and to Patty, but make sure you're giving our good friend Stephanie Miller some love, my radio sister on the West Coast, and Tom Hartman Show, the professor of everything progressive. So make sure you're staying tuned in to our shows today. Going to be a big April 3rd for folks, and we want to make sure you guys are getting all the good broadcasting in this progressive conversation that we try to have. So yeah, we're going to try to have this particular clip from Sarah Nelson for you guys later in the show, probably in the 7:30, somewhere right in there between Miss Gates and between Pat. Yeah, Henry saying thumbs up, we got it. So one of the things that I don't want to do, let me back up and change that. One of the things that I do want to do tomorrow is, for lack of better words, the remembrance of the assassination of Dr. King. And it's always close to me. I remember exactly where I was when the news came out. And one of the things that happens so often is that people, come with the speeches of the Dr. King has so many that you haven't seen, that so many people in America or the world have not seen. Speeches that he gave that were, we'll say it this way, they weren't full of profanity, but they weren't ready for prime time in the sense that they brought heat that America didn't want to really hear. The I Have a Dream speech and the March on Washington is one that will outlive most of our lives, because it was a speech that was palatable for America. Okay, it was an inspirational speech, if nothing else. And there's some great history behind how it actually got delivered. However, there are other speeches that Dr. King gave that you should just take some time and Google those speeches from prison and other church speeches that he gave. Just take some time and do yourself some good and do the same thing for Malcolm X. And the reason I say that is because oftentimes the speeches that are palatable ones gloss over the horror that so many people are enduring in this country and have been. And why is it that now, 1968? So 57 years, if my math is right, Henry. Why are we still fighting the same damn fight? I mean, seriously. And if you go back to Malcolm's assassination and Medgar Evers and Bobby and JFK and RFK, why are we still fighting? And ladies, don't be upset with me. All the women, the Fannie Lou Hamers and all the rest that have fought. So if I got some names missed, I apologize. The point I'm making is, why are we still fighting these doggone fights? And why do we need to just talk about the good side of these folks who gave their lives for a better way for our country, if not our world, our planet? And that's why with Joan being on and talking about climate change, it'll be important to get her voice in this. Climate change is something that all of these leaders were talking about. JFK was, Malcolm was, Medgar was, Bobby was talking about them. Of course, Dr. King was talking about them. All of these fighters were talking about the importance of taking care of our planet in one way or another. They spoke to it in some ways politically, some ways socially, some ways economically, but they all spoke to it in one way or another. But yet we're still fighting, and in some ways our fight now is a harder fight because we didn't do things years ago that they were telling us we need to do, Henry, to watch out for our environment. Why should this young cat come to this planet, come to this earth, to this life, and see us grown folks still fighting the same doggone fight that we should have we should have moved the needle greatly on decades ago. So that's just one area. And when I talk about Dr. King as it relates to, don't just play the speeches that inspire you. Play the ones that grab your attention and tick you off because of the things that he said were happening that need to be taken care of. And one of mine is when he talks about how the members of faith, the proponents of faith, the ministers, the churchgoers sat idly by while people's lives were being destroyed in the civil rights movement during the pinnacle at that time of the civil rights movement. That's one that really gets me because we still have folks today sitting idly by, not doing a doggone thing. Okay, so that and so I'm tying this to something that I don't want us to let go of because we go to the next. Women's rights, civil rights, social balance, economic balance, all of these things are the things that folks have been fighting for decades. All of my life. I can't remember a time when this wasn't something that we were fighting for fighting to beat back these social injustices. When we come back from this break, I want to tell you the other reason why I'm leaning into this and what I'm linking this to in terms of recent events. So let's take a quick break, guys. The number is 773-763-9278. This is Choose Views, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to Choose Views with Richard Chew on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hey, progressives, welcome back to Choose Views. Some shout-outs to Joan, some shout-outs to Henry. Folks love y'all. Henry, we get shout out to Henry. Hi, Henry. There you go. Henry. Oh, all right, guys. So what was the point I was making before we went to break? Here's where I'm coming from. The tariff situation, we knew it was coming. And when is our country going to be tired of not listening to people when they tell you something? A little bit of revisionist, got to walk back just a bit to talk about they tried to tell us. All these leaders that I listed earlier and many that I missed, not by me being ignorant to who they are, but there's so many of them. But in recent time, we've had two people that have run for the office of presidency that told us, I've taken it out of my vocabulary as best possible, Henry, saying they tried to tell us. No, they told us. Hillary Clinton, and I've said this many times and many others have, but we have to stop burying our heads in the sand. We have to start paying attention. Hillary Clinton laundry listed, and I believe it was in the second debate. I seem to remember that beautifully cream-colored pantsuit that she was rocking that night. She laundry listed and said, this is what's going to happen if we don't do the right thing and not elect Donald Trump. She said it then. I think there were 9 or 10 things she listed that were going to happen. She was spot on. But a lot of people buried their heads in the sand, and many people just couldn't see a woman become elected president. It's that simple. People made up stuff in their heads. Well, Hillary this, Hillary that, and her email, all of that was a bunch of garbage. And she told everybody. She didn't try. She said it out loud. The second debate, thanks, Kurt Herner from Ohio. I appreciate you, brother. She said it in the second debate. And I still think I was right. She was rocking that cream-colored pantsuit. Vice President Harris running for presidency. Again, we should stop having to always say, I got to vote for something. They got to inspire me. And I get all the conversation around voter suppression and hinkiness in this election and Musk. I get all of that. I respect all of that. At the end of the day, this country still is fighting over getting our heads out of the sand and listening to people who know maybe just a smidget more than you do about something. Vice President Harris, I watched a clip last night. She laundry listed it as well during the only debate that she had with Trump about what was going to happen with regard to these tariffs, what it would do to the economy. She talked about how Christmas in 2025 could be a hellscape. That's not her words, those are mine, because of the expense and the cost of things if Donald Trump were to get in office and go down this path. And so yesterday, he pulled the trigger. And I watched some of the markets overnight. We got it wrong, America, twice. We got it way wrong. And I'm not pointing fingers. I'm trying to uplift, and this is the connection that I want to make. Senator Cory Booker's 25-hour filibuster and speech to all the knuckleheads out there was not performative for the sake of performing. Go back and watch it to the best of your ability and look at the content. Look at the substance of what's in there. And look at it from the perspective of, are we going to finally listen? Are we going to finally listen? Are we, in reverse order, Vice President Harris tried to tell us. No, she told us. Again, try to keep that out of my vocabulary. She told us. Secretary Clinton told us. Malcolm told us. Bobby told us. JFK told us. Medgar told us. Fannie Lou Hamer told us. The list goes on. Dr. King told us. And on this anniversary, if you will, of his assassination, they all told us. Senator Booker told us again this week. And I just want our country to stop burying its head and walking around with its fingers in its ear and not paying attention. Particularly to then, after the fact, come back and ask what the hell just happened. And I've had more and more and more comments from folks who represent the group that fought the hardest to make it so that people wouldn't listen. And so I'm asking us, in the same passion to the extent that I can, that Senator Booker said, what are we going to do, America? Is this really what you want? And yes, we had some successes in elections yesterday. We definitely did. Some we didn't get across the finish line. And that's a bright. It's a bright bulb to have, a bright light to look at in terms of the things that we did succeed, the elections that we did succeed in. But I say but it's not enough, and we've yielded way too much territory. So I'm asking everybody to not let Senator Booker's filibuster leave your consciousness. I'm asking you to maybe save it, however you save audio and video items, and have it as a current reminder that this is unacceptable. And that we have to be willing, if we really care, and like he said, if your heart's not broken by America, you're not loving her enough. And I didn't get the words exactly the way in which he said them, but you get the point and the meaning of the message. The country we should be heartbroken with what we allow to happen. We should be severely disappointed in what we allow to happen. At the same time, as I always say, as much as I can, so often I say, I'm critical and complimentary at the same time. As much as I'm disappointed in our country's progress or turning back, I'm also inspired when I see someone like Senator Cory Booker stand there for 25 plus hours because he believes in our country so much, the promise of our country so much, and is impassioned by we call on our better angels, that I'm not giving up the fight. I've heard people say, well, I'm going to move to this place. No, I'm not going anywhere, because my ancestors, and my ancestry, let me get that right, fought too damn hard for me to be here. and for me to be forced to be responsible, to do a doggone thing. And I understand that there's a number of African-American folks that are like, I'm taking a pause for a bit. I get that. And I get it because I understand my culture's history and this country's history. And they're tired. And sometimes when you're tired, you got to take a break. So I'm not hating on anybody that's got to take a break of any community. But as the song by gospel singer Donnie McClurkin says, the lyric that is one of that is the key lyric in this song: "We fall down, but we get up. For a Savior's just a sinner that's fallen down and gotten back up again." America, we have to get back up. And we don't have time to wait and see how things are going to turn out. I know that we have to rest. That's different. Resting is different than waiting. Waiting is waiting to see what's going to happen. We don't have that luxury. We have to get back up. And so, the driving force behind me saying to all progressive liberal Democrats across the country about keeping Senator Booker's words close to you is that we shouldn't have to turn back to all of the other leaders in my lifetime to get a message today that we can apply. If we do, we do, because they did tell us. But in this recent years, and this week alone, we have had a senator who gets it, who understands and believes in it, and said, "America, we have to do better. We have no choice." Now, these tariffs that the idiot in the White House, and by the way, if somebody acts in an idiotic way, call them an idiot. If somebody acts in a stupid way, call them stupid for their actions. They may not be stupid, but they're acting that way. So, these tariffs, there's no question about if they're going to cause any pain and havoc and stress. These executive orders to cut the parts of the country, cut departments within the federal government, they are already having an impact. And they're having an impact because they're causing, I report on this every day as best I can in Choose Views News, of what the shifts are being taken, that are taking place right now by business leaders, by companies, because they recognize that not just the tariffs, but taking away government agencies or trying to, take them down to the studs, to use a contractor's language, is harmful. So we know that this is problematic. It's not problematic. It's hurtful. Let me just stop using soft words. It's damn hurtful to the country. And the reason that I made the comment earlier about, the air that we breathe is that, and Joan will talk about this in this next segment, it's something that's that simple. That impacts everybody. No matter where you are on the economic scale, our air that we breathe, our climate, is frankly our number one connective tissue, connective tissue. So I asked the question, like Senator Booker said, are we willing to fight for it? I hope we are. I really hope we are. Don't let his words suddenly be in your rearview mirror. Keep them close to you. All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, hopefully we'll be with Joan, 773-763-9278. Give us a call, give us a text, and we'll be right back.
Welcome back to Choose Views with Richard Chew on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
There. I went through. Oh, hey, progressives, we're back to Choose Views. Welcome back to Choose Views, 773-763-9278. We'll pop the lines open for you. But, this is going to get right to it, Henry. One of my buddies, partners, friends, Sheroes, someone I've admired for years and have had the last number of years the opportunity to work with here at WCPT is none other than the legendary Joan Esposito. You guys listen to Joan every day from 2 to 5 here on WCPT, and I do my best to thread the needle as the morning gets started to make sure that we've cleared the path so that by the time Joan gets here at 2, you guys are ready to go. But this morning, Joan has decided that I'm going to call Richard and say, "Hey, dude, what you doing?" Good morning, Joan. Welcome.
Good morning. How are you?
I have a big A smile on my face right now because you and I are talking, and I just want to say thank you so much for all that you do, all that you've done, and the leadership that you've provided here at WCPT and the voice that you've represented for such a long time here on WCPT, but more broadly here in Chicago and the greater Midwest. When I talk to people about you, everybody, there is not a person that I mention your name to that goes, "Who is that?" I'm not joking. And you and I have had this conversation in private, and folks know who you are and what you've represented. And I'm just so glad that you and I are able to chop it up for a little bit this morning. Yeah. So you had the opportunity to be at an event yesterday, presentation by our wonderful, I'll call him weatherman extraordinaire and weather historian, Tom Skilling. Tell us a little bit about that.
Richard, I don't get to go to a lot of these things because there are a lot of really interesting city club meetings, union club speakers that do their little programs like at noon. And I can't be downtown at noon and hear a program till 1:30 and make it back here in front of the microphone by 2. So I scared a couple of my friends. They're like, "Oh, are you sick? Are you sick?" No, I wanted to go hear Tom Skilling speak at the City Club, so I had to take yesterday as a day off the show to be able to drive downtown. And Tom was joined by a guy that I hadn't previously been familiar with. Apparently, he's been a guest on Edwin's show, Don Wubbles.
Yeah.
And he's a University of Chicago climate guy who was part of a team that won the Nobel Prize. He was one of the people who figured out that the ozone layer was shrinking because of these chlorocarbons. Yeah. And he's a Nobel Prize winner. He retired from the University of Chicago once and then ended up he said both he and Tom were failed at being retirees because Tom is still doing the occasional report for Channel 9. And Don is doing all these conferences and still teaching part-time. It was so amazing. You know, I've known Tom Skilling since I first got to Chicago. People remember me. If they remember me from television, they remember me from Channel 7 or Channel 5. But before I worked at either of those places, I worked briefly at Channel 9. I started at Channel 9 in July and ended up leaving in November to go to Channel 7. So I've known Tom Skilling for a very, very, very long time. And he is, first of all, if anybody in your audience has never met him, he is every bit as nice as he appeared to be on Channel 9 when he gave the weather. And he is one of the sweetest, kindest people walking the face of the earth. He is also the least political human being on the planet. But I've got to tell you, the cuts that are happening at NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, have him beside himself. Wow. And he's convinced that nobody in the White House understands what they're doing. Because he said, there's this misconception that somehow, they're cutting waste and they're cutting bloat and there's too many people. He says, you don't understand. NOAA was already understaffed.
Yep.
They had a couple dozen positions that they hadn't filled. He said not only should NOAA not be being cut, but he said with everything that's going on with the world and the extreme weather events, they should be hiring people for NOAA. He talked about how apparently we've gotten rid of already a lot of the weather balloons. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, how much money you just save with an 8-foot weather balloon that carries a little package that measures temperature, humidity, barometric pressure. And he said weather balloons serve a real purpose because they give you actual data. They take the actual measurements. And then he said, and if you monitor their movements, you also learn about wind speed. He said, yes, we can get data from satellites, but that involves algorithms and it's not a direct measurement. It's like seeing conditions and then trying to use an algorithm to see what that means. And the information isn't as precise. And he said, the thing about, you know, you might think getting rid of a weather balloon over the skies of North Dakota is no big deal. He said, but you know, weather is all connected. He said something can happen on the other side of the planet, and within hours, it affects the United States. It's all one big system. So those weather balloons that used to measure temperature, humidity, pressure, wind speed gave NOAA real-time data that helped them predict hurricanes in Florida. They predict tornadoes in the Midwest. He said that data from the Weather Service, when there's flooding, he said when the Fox River or the Kankakee River floods, he said it's the Weather Service that figures out where the crest will be, which takes law enforcement into the equation because then they know what areas they have to evacuate. And he said, you know, some people say, well, you know, the government could just get their weather from a private source like AccuWeather. And he looked at the crowd and he said, where do you think AccuWeather gets their stuff? They get it from the Weather Service.
Joan, this is why you and I can't do shows together too often, because Joan and I, and Patty too, so Patty, don't be upset, but be loving in this. We are passionate about common sense. We are passionate about common sense and what makes the most sense. And when you were talking about this, Joan, again, I've said this so many times, you've heard me say it. When someone's speaking to a topic, I try not to take notes, but listen. But one of the things that I wrote down in terms of budget and budgeting with regard to these cuts that are reckless and harmful and they're real time is we talk about our defense budget, and many presidents and administrations have always said we want to have a strong defense, and it's the stump speech stuff that we've all watched and seen over the years. But when I think about the defense budget, I think about it from a different angle. I think about how do we protect ourselves from ourselves, not so much from others all the time. And the fight that we're having with the environment is a fight that we started. And, you know, I go back to when we look at budgeting to make this point, the defense budget is bloated, if there's anything that's bloated, relative to what we do with that money, versus something like the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration that's severely underfunded and being cut for some basic common sense things, like I just said. This is where... And I go back to, because I knew I had an idea of how you and I might be talking this morning. This is where people have got to pull their heads out of the sand. Our climate is so critically important. And it's when you said that about Tom being one of the least political folks, for him to be leaning in like this. But this is his baby. This is his specialty. This is his life's work.
Oh, my God. You have never met a human being who lives and breathes weather like Tom Skilling. I mean, you cut Tom Skilling open and you're going to find isobars, inside of him. This guy is obsessed with all things weather. And the reason I think he's been so successful on television is he's always conveyed that passion on television. You might not, care what the isobars are looking like, but man, oh man, the fact that this guy cares so much and wants to explain it to you, it's just riveting.
It is, and it's funny you said that about his passion about this. I can tell you so many times that I've been watching Tom deliver the weather and been watching the report with my wife, Ann, and we both have said Tom is laying it on because he is passionate. And the other thing, he's excited about it. Mm-hmm. He's literally, he gets excited in delivering the weather report to us. And that should tell us something about not only his passion, but his understanding of how important it is to all of us. One of the things that you said earlier, Joan, about the weather, the local weather acknowledgments or the local weather tools and how they impact law enforcement when it comes to, see, this is what a lot of times I think folks just don't get. And when I say they don't get it, they don't understand how some of the smallest bits of budgeting can impact us in a major way. It's a domino sort of effect that if we don't make sure we're putting money and pushing our leaders to put the budget in the right places, not even when you're talking about cutting, just adding to where money should go, then we miss out on what this is where trickle down does impact us, because we miss out on the opportunity for local entities to be able to do a better job when it comes to safety. Yep.
And one thing that I hadn't thought of, I mean, you know, we think of these alerts we get on our phones about tornadoes and things like that, but fisheries and farmers, they can't survive without this data from the Weather Service. Because the Weather Service isn't just about, whether or not there's going to be severe weather. The Weather Service monitors the oceans, the ocean currents, and how that changes. They monitor the atmosphere. They work with other weather agencies around the world to create this planet-wide program of monitoring what's going on. And there are industries. The fisheries industry, the farming industry is going to be really, really hurt if they can't get the information that they need to do their businesses successfully. I mean, it does a lot more than what you think. Edwin actually was there. Our Saturday host, Edwin Heisendrath, was at this thing too, and he asked a really good question at the end of it, Richard. He said, okay, we now have a better understanding of these agencies and what they do. What's going to happen if the Trump administration does to the University of Chicago and does to NOAA, like what they're trying to do to Columbia, cutting away funding, taking away grants? And the woman who moderated the question and answer between Tom and Tom was the chancellor for the University of Chicago, who is in herself, she's on all these international commissions, and she said that right now there's a task force that has been formed, and they are looking at, because we have been as successful as we've been in large part because we are so good at science. We are good at science because we spend money on science, because we groom our students to be scientists. And she said they're actually looking now, if there are severe financial cuts that they will try to make it up with philanthropy, but if they can't make it up, she said, we're looking at what are the areas where we absolutely have to focus whatever resources we have left so that we don't fall too far behind, so that when in 3 or 4 years, hopefully when things change and the funding is restored, she said there are some areas of science where if we neglect them, we will be in such a deep hole compared to the rest of the world, we will never, ever catch up. And she said we're trying to identify the areas that are just absolute musts for just holding on to what we've got science-wise. And they were also talking about, European universities. The woman who was the chancellor from U of Chicago said European universities are salivating because they are ready to pick off the best and the brightest from us. She said the brain drain that's going to follow these cuts. She said we could go from being a world leader in science to being a country that never catches up again to everybody else. And she said it's just the implications, the long-term implications of the pain and the suffering this is going to cause are just staggering.
It's sobering. The word that popped into my mind is sobering, and two other words that popped into my mind are tipping point. And this is good to hear that the people who are at the front of the line in this conversation are speaking to it, and particularly when it comes to education. I got a text from someone that said that we're already losing ground, and we have been for a while. I've said this so many times here on my show, Joan, that I go back to the 80s, the early 80s, particularly when we first started to really see these sort of cuts going back to the Reagan administration, and how those cuts impacted us when it comes to unions, when it comes to education, and the list goes on. And where we are now is we've had this brain drain. It's been a slow, it's been a drip, candidly, for a while. And the faucet's gotten turned on a little bit more every time we have a Republican in the White House. And frankly, every time we have Republican governors in states, we see a reduction in the emphasis on education from ground up, from kindergarten through high school and college. And it's been a slow drip. The faucet's gotten more open, and now it's about to be full on because of the fact that we're pulling from our the Department of Education. I mean, what country doesn't want its citizenry to be educated and to be informed and to be competitive? It's actually, and this is what just so troubles me and pisses me off, frankly, that so many people are willing to yield our competitiveness, but at the same time say we're the greatest country on the planet. It's not congruent.
No. And the feeling among the panelists yesterday was that the Trump administration honestly does not understand what they are doing. They don't understand the ramifications of this. And, we've seen what Elon has been, the charge he's been leading. I mean, it isn't, well, we think there's a government bloat in NOAA, so we're going to do a deep dive. We're going to audit all the books, and we're going to see how, who works where, and then we're going to figure out where we can cut. That's the way Democrats say. You want to propose something like that, they'll sign on to it. Nobody wants to pay for waste, but to go in and like what they've done at NOAA is they fired a bunch of people, and then they realized they had to bring them back. Other people are being paid to be on administrative leave. Somebody, Andrew Rosenberg, there's a publication called The Guardian U.S. that's really been following what's been going on at NOAA. And they had this article where they quoted this guy who was formerly the deputy director of marine fisheries. And he said, dysfunction is a polite way of putting it. You could also say it's incompetent chaos. I mean, that's what, this isn't tech. The words, the watchwords in tech are, move fast and break things. Well, maybe that works, in the world of tech, but that doesn't work in government.
It doesn't work. It might work in the business sector, and I can speak to that. But it doesn't work when we're talking about the institutions that help us navigate on a day-to-day basis. That would be our government systems. And we, so many times, Joan, we all say this. We know they're not perfect. That's the beauty of them, is that they're not perfect because it means there's room for them to get better. But to slash them, it's like I've said so many times, surgeons will tell you this. When they're performing surgery to fix an injury, they do everything they can to not cut into the muscle. They do everything they can. And that's what this Doge and this administration are doing. They're cutting into the muscle. And that's when it's that, to your point about what Tom, I believe you said, Tom said, the irreparable harm. That's real, because when you cut into the muscle, it takes a hell of a lot longer time to repair and to replace and to heal. That's what we're doing. And I want to come to something that you said, go back to something you said that I was just text a moment ago. the other part about the importance of the weather balloons is they give early warning to our electrical grid. So, that's just a practical thing. If our that's why, again, it's a simple common sense thing. It doesn't take rocket science to understand. The earlier you can get warned about something, the better you can be in dealing with it, to your point about local law enforcement when it comes to something as winds and flooding. So, I wish I could have been a fly on the wall with you yesterday. I know that it had to be quite a joy to be there with your longtime friend and colleague, but also the learnedness that was going on in that room.
It was really worthwhile. It was, it's a big deal. I don't like to, just randomly take a day off to be at an event. It has to be a really special event for me to do that. And this definitely was that. And I thought it was interesting. You and I were talking about what a great guy Tom is. When the event started and the president of the City Club took to the mic, he said, we've had sitting politicians, we've had professional athletes. He said, we've never had anybody that has had such a long receiving line of people who want to say hello to them before an event starts than we've had today with Tom Skilling. He said he's outdone all of the people that we've had in the past as far as folks wanting to see him and talk to him. He has a lot of fans, and justifiably so.
Tom, this is the thing of the power of WGN, and we all know it, those of us that have been blessed to be here in Chicago and see its expansiveness over the years. But you can go to different parts of the country and, you get some WGN. And so there's people who know about Tom Skilling because they saw a part of WGN or heard something from WGN in another city that wasn't just here in the city of Chicago.
Well, so. Exactly. When I, back a million years ago when I worked at WGN, back then people, if you got fan mail, it was snail mail that it came through the post office. And all of the fan mail I got was not only from outside of Chicago, it was outside of Illinois. I would get fan mail from Iowa, and because WGN, first superstation. Yeah.
That's true. That's so very true. And speaking of super, what an opportunity for us to be together. And I have a certain specialness for you and the work that you've done. And you talk about your history and a million years ago and all those things that talk about our chronological time on this planet. But I thank you, Joan, and so many listeners and so many people throughout the country. Thank you for your leadership in this space, and you've been doing it. And I say this positively, so don't be upset with me. You've been doing it for a long time.
I've been doing it for a very long time.
But the blessing of that is that you keep on being able to do it, and I know that you know that. And yes. I just want to send you all the love and support that you deserve and you've earned in this wonderful life that you had. So thank you for being here.
Well, that's very kind of you, and right back at you. WCPT is very fortunate to have somebody like you on every morning.
Thank you, Joan. I appreciate that. Thanks for being with us this morning. You know how it rolls. We got to get to this break, but have a good day today, and I appreciate you taking the time out, Joan.
Thanks, Richard.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye. So I hold my breath and not she means a lot to all of us. So get you some Joan Esposito. Check out Joan's show today, 2 to 5 p.m. She's going to have great guests on, as always. And make sure that you follow her and pass her on to the people that you know in different communities. And how cool of her, Henry, to have been at that event. And for her to say what she said about Tom, he's one of the least political folks out there because his baby is something else. And for him to speak to it the way that he did obviously should get people's attention. And for those who want to criticize education and learning and knowing a thing or two, we all breathe. How many times can I say it, Henry? You, me, and 5 other people are walking down the street. We're all at that moment doing something in common other than just hanging together. We're breathing the same air. So if we're going to fight about protecting certain budgets on a federal level, which impacts us on a state and local level, The NOAA is one of them that we should be leaning into. Our climate and more broadly speaking is the other part of that. So let's do a better job of pushing our folks that are in office. Let's get behind the Cory Bookers of the world. Let's not let his 25-hour plus filibuster and inspiration and heartfeltness be left on deaf ears. Don't let that be in your rearview mirror, guys. Please don't do that. He's the modern day. He's the accumulation of all of those leaders that I spoke about, even Vice President Harris and Secretary Clinton telling us, here is what's going on. Here's what will happen. He reached back years, decades, centuries, in fact, and presented that to us this week. So please don't let that get too far in your rearview mirror. Thanks, Joan, for being with us. She's going to probably get a little bit of rest and get ready for her show today. But we're going to take a quick break. The number, of course, is 773-763-9278. We'll do our best to get your calls in, so stay with us. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Choose Views with Richard Chu on WCPT 820 AM, where facts matter. Take it away, Richard.
Hey, progressives, welcome back to Choose Views, 773-763-9278. Great to have Joan with us. Guys, let's dive right in. Let's grab some calls real quickly. Let's go to Jim here, I guess, in Chicago. Jim, good morning. Welcome to Choose Views.
Good morning, Rich. I listened to Susan Crawford's acceptance speech, and she mentioned as a little girl, she never dreamed she'd be running against the richest man in the world, which no kid in school would ever think they'd be running against the richest man in the world. But she was victorious. What's interesting about these tariffs and Trump is, here's an individual who defrauded people at a university, was convicted of 34 business fraud accounts in a matter of an hour by a jury of his peers.
Right.
And he's defrauded people for years, and he's going to dictate economic policy around the world.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody's that silly. I wouldn't, let's face it, but if you had a lemonade stand and one of the kids in the neighborhood was caught stealing, you'd hire the kid to at least leave a little money in the till.
Good point, Jim.
I mean, I would. I'd say you take half, but leave me something anyway.
Don't take all the cookies out of the cookie jar.
Yeah, please, because I made the lemonade, made the stand.
Yep.
But anyway, but these cuts, like Joan was saying. Think about it. I saw Tom's bit on Channel 9, and he said, do you realize, he said, this saves lives. If you have a tornado or whatever the case may be, a heat wave, it could be any weather event. If you get a 45-minute warning, you're going to save lives. It's only natural.
Yeah.
But these cuts are across the whole. The hospitals are being cut. The doctors are being cut. What do they think? It's going to cost lives. That's what it's going to cost.
Yep.
And we're at here's what it is, Rich. We were at the richest point in our history.
Yeah.
We were at the most wealthy point. Why would you cut services at that point? It doesn't make any sense. In other words, when will you expand them? You can't expand when you're broke. You only expand when you've got the money to expand.
It takes that much more effort to work from that deficit, which is crazy.
Well, sure. We were at the most wealthiest point. And you remember Joe Biden saying we can do anything. We're Americans. We can do anything. This guy.
Yeah.
They're just there to defraud. Anyway, Rich, thanks for taking my call. Thanks, you.
Jim.
Have a good morning, Rich.
You too. Appreciate you. All right. Yeah, I mean, Jim put it plain. We do better when we're moving forward than having to go backwards and then go. I mean, it's crazy. And, it's like hiking. You're on a path. You have a path mapped out. You may have to stop and make sure you're right. But, it's like, well, let's go back this way just because I want to go back. Anyhow. Speaking of moving forward, we got some great folks and great leaders in the state of Illinois on all levels. Not perfect, but working to get better. And one of them is a guest that we've had on this show, been privileged to have on this show before, and is one of those leaders that leads from the front. And I appreciate, once again, having the opportunity to speak with the president, CTU, none other than Stacey Davis Gates. Good morning, Ms. Gates. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thank you for having me again. How are you doing?
I'm good. What are you doing this April 3rd morning, 2025? What are you into today?
Well, we had a delegates meeting last night, the highest governing body in our union, and they recommended the tentative agreement and an overwhelming vote to our full membership. And our full membership will vote at the end of next week. In between now and then, we're going to have, info sessions to kind of break the contract out for them. But really an unprecedented meeting with people. I had, veteran teachers, Black women who worked in the district, since Paul Vallis was the CEO. And they got up there and they talked about the cumulative nature of this contract and what it represents to them in terms of all the fights over, the last 15 years at least, that our union has been involved in. I think about the Diet High School basketball team. They're state champions this year. But that school was on the closing list. Like, Rahm Emanuel closed that school. People were on a hunger strike for, over a month to, get it off the list. And then, little known fact maybe is that we took that school to the bargaining table in 2016 and they got a designation as a sustainable community school, which means that it received more human resources and financial resources. So the cumulative nature of this work, the struggle, our organizing, and our negotiating, I think you can see it in Diet most impressively, to be honest. A Black neighborhood school, high school in Washington Park was given up, left for closing, and now it is blossoming. They have art classes. At one point there were 15 kids in that school. They were taking physical education online, and now they are winning academic and athletic awards. It's investment. It's care. It's love. It's, all hands on deck. Yep. Those hunger strikers were grandmothers and teachers and organizers.
It's what's so amazing, and for you guys who don't know, I have to be respectful and also informative. Stacey Davis Gates is the president of the Chicago Teachers Union. She's been with us before, and she's one of those folks that, like I said, leads from the front. And so those who might not be in the Chicagoland area but understand the importance of education, she is one of those people that makes sure that through her leadership, that the teachers are taken care of. But as the teachers are taken care of, that means the students and the schools are taken care of. What a novel idea for this country to take on. Let's take care of our teachers. Let's take care of our school systems, which is indirectly yet directly taking care of what? Our children. And I am so proud of the fact that you've leaned in and worked hard to make sure that this has happened. Some of the things that are taking place, and you can maybe get a little bit more into the details. But if I understand this correctly, it's a 4% raises for the first year of the contract, and increasing in subsequent years. Let's talk about the numbers a little bit in terms of what actually happened.
Look, members are receiving the highest raise that they have in a generation, to be honest with you. And it's basically in line with most of the public employee unions have gotten in Chicago in the last couple of years. But it's a 4-year contract. The cost of living increases at 4% tied to inflation. And so, that gives members some stability there. And it also sets a wage floor for the paraprofessionals in our union. These are the women who, do the support work, 80% female, over 80% Black and brown women. These women will earn no less than $40,000 a year. We've also increased the number of support staff in our school communities, which, also helps us address the needs and our students' IEPs. It helps address the needs of small group instruction, especially in the early childhood spaces. And they have increased job protections. I think that's the crown jewel of the bread and butter part of this contract, if you will, is because that those women have more stability in their household incomes. People make make a mistake when they forget that women are heads of households. This is not supplemental income. This is the income.
Yeah.
And so these women have an opportunity to have some stability there. But I think what's important, especially for your national audience, is that the Chicago Teachers Union over time has used the collective bargaining agreement to address what's needed, not just in the classroom, but in society. So you see with Trump's attack on bureaucracy and government, the Department of Education has been brought to its knees. And in doing so, what happens is that our LGBTQIA students don't have the civil rights protections enshrined in our school districts anymore. We bargained that in this contract. Special education students in the law, we are worried about the lack of enforcement with bad law. We've made some gains to protect what we have and expand a little bit more. You can use a contract with the school district, with an employer, to push for not just for, the wages and benefits, but to also protect your colleagues, protect the people that you serve, to make way for resources that have become political footballs. Black kids should hear that their history in this country is American history, that they their ancestors added tremendous dimension to it. We've enshrined that freedom for history teachers to do. There's just so much you can do with the collective bargaining agreement, and we better start evaluating, especially as workers, what other ways in which we can fortify our democracy. At CTU, we think it's through our solidarity, making sure that we have sanctuary protections that not just say these are sanctuary schools, but provide the resources to implement the policy. So when federal agents do come knocking at the door, which they did, some months ago, that people are prepared to spring into action. And quite frankly, that's what did happen. Young people were protected.
And thank you for breaking that down. One of the things that pops into my head all the time about this sort of about the Department of Education as it relates to the perception of what people think that it does versus what it actually does and who's impacted by it. So many times we hear these federal agencies are only there because they're helping minority people. So we have to cut them because there's waste, fraud, and abuse. And it's become like this meme, waste, fraud, and abuse. But the target, in my reading and understanding, is it's spread itself out. So the target may have been by people who want to cause harm directed at a particular community or communities. But now what we're seeing when it comes to education and the Department of Education is that it's going to impact those folks who are privileged in certain suburban communities where their kids don't go to private schools. Am I right or wrong there?
You're absolutely right. That's why I highlighted special education. That's why I highlight LGBTQIA students. Yes, the Department of Education has been a valuable safety net for Black children, for children whose families, live below the poverty line. Those things, have been a benefit. And those things have also been a benefit for white children who need special education services, and school districts either don't have the funding to fulfill those needs, don't get the funding, or don't prioritize. These are ways in which we've built policies over time to protect real people. And real people come in all shapes and sizes and colors and socioeconomic status. So this idea that the Department of Education was only a safety net for the others is deeply problematic, especially because of everyone benefits. Like when you think about Title IX and how it speaks to the equity and resourcing sports through gender. But Title IX also protects young people on campus by creating protocols and safety rails to address sexual assault as well, right? it doesn't matter what color or what gender you are. Predators are predators, and they need to be punished, to be honest with you. What the Department of Education has done over time is create guardrails, policies, protocols to make sure that young people who are assaulted have the support and the space to make a claim and to get justice. Those things get wiped away too. So it's not just Black people, immigrant children, bilingual speakers. It is also Americans, everyone. This othering of our society has really and truly made us more susceptible to these attacks because of how people have been led to believe that the federal government helps. But look, government is the infrastructure to our country. It is created to promote our democracy. That's why using a collective bargaining agreement to reaffirm the point of our society and collective solidarity is important. So while the Department of Education is rolling away these things, our contract is strengthening them within the district. And look, and deep respect to the Chicago Public Schools and the city of Chicago for being available to say yes to these things as well. And in doing so, reaffirming their commitment to protect our young people as well. That's definitely a universal win. And this contract has many of those, from lowering class sizes for our students to making sure that women are paid equitably, to also making sure that young people have, more funding for sports programs. They'll have buses and uniforms and equipment. Cheerleading and softball will be given the same amount of resources as, football and boys basketball. That's the kind of equity that's enshrined in this contract.
And it's a brilliant contract, and I love how you've laid this out. One of the things I wanted to ask you about this is, if you can, talk a little bit more about the equity and the social justice part and provisions of this, because I think that's so important to so many people, but they sometimes don't realize it until it comes to their front doorstep. But talk about the equity and social justice provisions in this contract.
Well, I'll talk about it through a common good subject of bargaining. So we have two. For the very first time, we've negotiated with the district a way in which facilities, the renovation, the rebuilding, the refurbishing, it has to have some guardrails and look like sustainability. So we have put very clear language in the contract that speaks to making sure, number one, our students are being trained in sustainability. So our CTE programs, how many students can we get trained up? Can we get solar panels on schools? Can we make sure that we're removing lead pipes from schools, that schools are the priority? Those are just a few examples of how the contract speaks to the facilities and the rebuilding of facilities in light of our earth, actually being, like last night in Chicago, we experienced, I promise you, 3 different seasons and from the morning to the afternoon, and so there's something really happening here. And so how do we respond to that? You saw school districts across the country releasing students because of the heat wave, because their facilities couldn't support the students' school day because it was too hot. Well, Karen Lewis took care of that in 2012 with air conditioners. So, mandating that they be in every school. So we were able to keep kids in school. So we built on that concept and created a bargaining proposal that, gives the school district a timeline in which to put solar panels on the roofs of schools. So that's a way in which it manifests. Another way I think it manifests as well, and we've said this a lot of times, we have students, a lot of unhoused students in the Chicago Public Schools, an estimated 20,000. The vast majority of them are Black students. How do you do homework when you don't have a home? I'm sure people have heard me say this before. What we've done for the first time ever is bring every agency together that the city has under its purview, that the district has under its purview in terms of departments, and we are making them work with us to find support and resources for these students and their families to obtain housing. It's not just here is something over here and here is something over here. How do we create a staffing model that helps people in the buildings pull all of these resources together, makes like city agencies listen and respond to the needs of those families because they're CPS families, so they can get the resources, using our contract as a conduit to put people in homes. That's another component of this contract. Look, I know people say that CTU does the most. They are absolutely right as I stand here, completely exhausted. And we also say, though, that, our young people are our future. There's songs about it.
Yep.
So prove it.
That's right.
Prove it.
And I appreciate you saying that as we wrap up. I mean, this is why we've got to commit. You and I have to commit, and our folks, to having this be a regular part of our conversation, because this doesn't go away. And the work that you've done to get the committee to this point and to get this contract to this point is just astonishing. And I appreciate you and Cory Booker have been doing some work this week. So we appreciate all that you.
Cory Booker is about that life, isn't he?
Isn't he, though?
Oh, my God.
You may have heard me say this earlier as we wrap up. That don't let what he did in terms of caring for this country, caring for all of our citizens, caring for all of our children, all of our folks, be something that's in your rearview mirror. Keep it present. And I say the same thing about you, what you're doing here locally, because we are a spotlight city. For good or not good, we are a spotlight city. I'm going to say for the good of what we can get done when there's collective bargaining, when people come together and make things happen. And you've represented that for a long time, and more specifically in the recent weeks with all this negotiating that you've done. So I want to give you a big high five and a big hug to let you know that we appreciate that work. Let folks know how they can find you as we wrap up, and I'll just tell you this before we go get you some rest now. But let folks know how they can find you, Ms. Gates.
Listen, but before I get the rest, tonight we're going to be celebrating Karen Lewis at the Union. There's an event there. Yeah, there's a book event there this evening where we'll be discussing her legacy. And it is important to discuss Karen. I'm going to give this the last. People will find me. They just type me in, whatever. But, here's the thing, and this is important. Karen Lewis gave us a blueprint of leadership for moments like the ones we're in right now, where there's a very, particular neoliberal leadership in this country that acquiesces to the ridiculousness of the right wing. And the right wing has a particular insidious, outlook on what it means to, resource the public good. Karen Lewis took on both of those forces, and what we have today in Chicago in our union is the cumulative impact of that. I would tell people to come out tonight and understand how you fight back in these times. Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate you.
As always, great to have you with us, Stacey Davis Gates, the president of CTU here in Chicago. Thanks for being with us. I know you'll get some rest when you can, but you have been just a champion, and we appreciate all of the work that you've been doing. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks a lot. You take care.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Yeah, guys, she's one of those fighters. She's about that business, as she said about Senator Booker. And I'm proud to have her on our show because she always speaks the truth without worrying about what people think about her speaking that truth. And that's what we need. It has to happen. It has to continually be going on. We don't I know y'all probably get tired of me saying it this way. We don't have the luxury of not fighting. I know we have to rest sometimes, but we don't have the luxury to not fight, to get back up again. So that's just, where I'm coming from in this space. Wow. Well, let's see what we can do. We got a break coming up, and I don't know what we'll do with regard to calls. Why don't we do this? Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to make sure we get our next guest on, and then maybe we can wrap up the show with some of our calls. So you guys sit tight. We'll try our best to get to you. But let's take a quick break. The number is 773-763-9278. Choose Views. We'll be right back.
It's Choose Views with Richard Chew on WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Hey, progressives, welcome back to Choose Views, 773-763-9278. First we had Joan, then we had Stacy. Now we're going to make our way over to chatting with, another great leader here in the state of Illinois, Pat Devaney, who's the Secretary-Treasurer of the Illinois AFL-CIO. We are talking about unions today in our own little way. We're making a little statement in that space. Pat, good morning and welcome to Choose Views.
Hey, good morning, Richard. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you perfectly. You're great.
All right. So I said we're talking about unions today. We're talking about the effectiveness of coming together and working together to get stuff done. And you're part of the We Are One coalition. And obviously, when we work together and fight together, we do get stuff done. But Pat, take a moment if you can, if you will, and introduce yourself. Let folks know, as I always try to do with our guests that haven't been on with us, a little bit about your background, but also what you're currently doing and what you're currently responsible for.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm with the Illinois AFL-CIO. It's the State Federation of Labor, representing 900,000 union members and 1,500 affiliates across the state. I've been doing this for about 5.5 years. Prior to that, I presided over the Associated Firefighters of Illinois, the State Firefighters Union, and did that for about a dozen years. Before that, I lobbied for them for about 4 years, advocating for professional firefighters, and I was a firefighter downstate in Champaign for 25 years. But, absolutely so happy to be doing what I'm doing now, fighting in solidarity for our union brothers and sisters. As you know, today it's more important than ever. The other thing that I was able to do when I was at the firefighters was be one of the founding members of the We Are One Illinois Coalition. And it was formed back in 2011 in response to the Illinois General Assembly, the state of Illinois, implementing Tier 2 in the public employees pension system, which drastically slashed benefits for public employees across the state at all levels of government, state, county, municipal. And so back in 2011, when they implemented it, it was in response to the Great Recession, caused, of course, by the banking industry, the financial world. And instead of addressing the problem that has existed in governments at all levels of improper funding for so many years, and intentionally not providing the amount of funding into our pension systems to provide the benefits that are promised to employees in the future, instead of addressing that, which was the problem, instead they took it out on the workers, the typical response, and slashed benefits for people who were hired after January 1st, 2011. So we're working in Springfield right now to make sure that we restore retirement security for our Tier 2 brothers and sisters and increase the benefits that they slashed, 14, 15 years ago.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about that. Talk about Tier 2 for a second, because I think a lot of people don't know what that represents or what carnage it created, and then maybe we can lean into what you've been able to do to affect that in moving in a different direction.
Yeah, absolutely. So back in March of 2010, like I said, in response to the Great Recession, in a single day, they passed a bill through committees, the House committees, the Senate, and on its way to then Governor Quinn for his signature to just drastically reduce benefits and really strip away retirement security for anyone who was hired in public employment after January 1st, 2011. They did that by a variety of methods, but there's four main buckets. They put a salary cap on the amount of salary that can be used to calculate your pension. They changed the way they calculate the final average salary, going way further back to further decrease the benefit. They increased the age and how long you have to be in the system to the best. And I'll talk about that in just a second. And then they also slashed the cost of living adjustment, that amount that's tied to the consumer price index, to account for inflation, to make sure that as you get into your golden years and you become elderly, you still have the purchasing power to buy medicine, pay your rent, the things that people need to do to live with dignity. And just as an example, I'll use an example as a teacher. I just heard my sister, Stacy Davis Gates, on before me. A teacher now in Illinois, a suburban downstate teacher, let's say, they now are forced to pay over 9% into a system that provides them a pension benefit that's only cost about 7% of payroll to be able to pre-fund, to have the money in place to pay those obligations once you retire. So a teacher now in Tier 2 is paying 2% greater out of each and every paycheck than what it costs to pay for their retirement benefit. I don't think any reasonable person would think that that's a system that was fair or provides the type of retirement security that we should be, giving workers, especially in Illinois, where we believe investing in workers and labor and the things that are important to union members and the values that we have.
So the 2% gap, as a finance dude myself and part of my life, I ask the question, so what the hell happens with that 2%? I mean, you got $2 extra for something that doesn't need it, then you should be saving that money. But I'll shut up and let you answer that question.
That's the real tragedy because, literally for decades, the state, some people think, it was an accident. They didn't put in enough. They didn't know. They created laws that systemically, literally intentionally underfunded the amount of money that were going into these retirement plans to where every year they'd make a legal, I'm air quoting, contribution, but it grew the unfunded liability. It ballooned it. So now we're in the place that we're at where we're having trouble keeping up as a state. And so in response to that, they slashed the benefits. And now you're right. They're paying 2% more than the value of their benefit to pay for the sins of politicians over decades of not providing the accurate amount of funding into these plans to make sure that the assets are in place to pay the benefits. So it's really so unfair to the worker. It's unfair to taxpayers. And so we're trying to work in Springfield right now to rectify that situation and to make sure that people have the retirement security that they need and deserve.
Talk about that and integrate that with the words safe harbor and the provision that's part of this and how that's going to have impact on this problem.
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked that because this is a really important point. So when they did this back in 2011, like I said, it was so hastily done, literally a bill introduced in the morning and passed both chambers by the afternoon, something that usually takes months and years to do. They didn't fully vet out the problems that they were going to create. And one of them is many governments, state, local, and county, many years ago, chose to opt out of having their employees participate in Social Security. So that employer doesn't pay into Social Security. And so when they retire, that employee isn't entitled to a Social Security benefit. Now, to do that, you had to make a deal with the federal government and say, we're going to provide a defined benefit pension plan that is at least equal or greater than what Social Security would provide. So when they created Tier 2, we now have in place a system that is in violation of the requirements to provide a defined benefit pension that is at least equal, I'm simplifying it a little bit, to what somebody would otherwise get in Social Security. So if we don't fix this as a state, we're going to have the IRS and the federal government come in and fix it for us at a great cost to the employers, the governmental employers at all levels of government. So that's something we need to fix. But one of the things that's really important is we cannot only do that because the leading driver of the Social Security safe harbor issue is the salary cap. And so if we only adjust the salary cap, we're only going to be helping the higher wage earners, which is really a small handful, not the overwhelming majority of very modest wage earners that are doing public service in very important, hard jobs, nurses, firefighters, police officers, across the state. So it's something that's important to fix, but we can't stop just there. We need to address the other issues that were created when they created the Tier 2 scheme.
One of the things that I often say is all players means all players. So in this space, all parts of this scenario, all parts of this fix have to be addressed, because if we fix one and not the other or others, then we're going to just kind of be retracing our steps to go back and say, well, we forgot that, so now we got to fix that, which is this back and forth that's never effective when it comes to budgeting, and particularly when it comes to retirement plans. And it seems as though you guys are taking on all angles so that nothing's left behind this time. Would that be a fair way to say it?
You are exactly right. A foundational principle of our coalition is that we need to address this for all workers. There's some who try to pick off, we'll help firefighters or we'll help teachers, but other types of employment and classes of employees, let's not really address them because perhaps it's not as politically popular to do so. Our principle is that we are all in this together. You talked about unity. You talked about solidarity when you were introducing me, and that's a principle that we really strictly adhere to. So our proposal and what we're working on right now and working groups with the General Assembly is a comprehensive bill that takes the first big steps to address the problems in Tier 2 across all 17 of the different pension systems that are defined in Illinois statute.
And I was hoping you'd be able to address it that way. So what can specifically be done in your experience to fix Tier 2? I mean, what are your line items when you say boom, boom, boom? These are the things we've got to hit first. And is awareness, because I think that's a question that I would want to know. Do people know which tier they're in?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've been doing over the last year since we got the We Are One coalition back together is creating that awareness. Now, I'll start with this. Most Tier 2 members, they begin public employment, they're in a classroom, they're in a firehouse, they're in a police station, and they're not really thinking about retirement, as many people don't when they're in their 20s or early 30s. But they quickly learn that they're doing the exact same job as the person standing next to them, but they're getting compensation in the form of deferred compensation at a far lower level, totally antithetical to the values that we have as union members. So our proposal aims to solve for those 4 buckets where they slash the benefits in regards to the salary cap, final average salary, the age. A teacher now, they get done with college, they're 22, 23 years old. They're now expected to work for 45 years in a kindergarten classroom to the age of 67 to be able to retire. Again, what reasonable person believes that somebody at 67 years old, and most people for that, and for that, would be able to do that job efficiently and effectively as you get into your older years? Same is true with firefighting, police officers, nurses. So, yeah, we're really trying to address all of the problems that were created when they slashed these benefits. The good news is this. We have over 80,000 followers now that we're communicating with. They're engaged. We had a week of action last spring where we had 65,000 members call and email into the state capitol. We had thousands of people in webinars over the summer. We had town hall meetings, 8 of them last fall in September, from Rockford to Marion, from east to west. And then during the veto session last November in the General Assembly, we packed 3,000 people into the state capitol for a rally, demanding that legislators finally address. It was the biggest event. I've been working on the Capitol for over 20 years that I've ever seen. It was amazing. So our people are engaged. They're frustrated. They're angry that they're not being treated fairly, and we're demanding that the General Assembly and the governor rectify the problems that were created almost 15 years ago.
And has there been an allyship of folks willing to sit down and say, yeah, you're right, this is a problem that we can, in some ways, have been kicking the can down the road? So are you getting that? Are folks listening that are in the General Assembly and the legislators say, yeah, Pat and the rest of the leadership in this effort, yeah, we need to sit down and get this resolved?
Yeah, as you know, we've got a very pro-worker, pro-labor state. We have supermajorities of pro-labor people in the House and the Senate, and every constitutional office. So, from the governor, J.B. Pritzker, the Senate President, the Speaker of the House, we're working in partnership with them to take steps to fix this problem. They believe in workers. They have a long track record of investing in workers and union workers in Illinois. So we're going to continue to work with them to finally get to the place where we make these big first steps. And then it's just going to have to be a process where we continue to improve upon it until we have parity between all of the workers that work in public employment in Illinois.
So are you seeing membership? You put some big numbers out in terms of people that are showing up and that are part of your outreach, but are you seeing an increase in membership involvement? And both two things, Pat: increase in membership, and secondly, involvement in the union itself.
Oh, absolutely. So we recently did polling just to check in with our members. We've had a lot of changes in government at all levels, as we've seen, most of us in horror over the last several months, and just to check in and see where they're at. The number one issue that they identified that they wanted the Illinois AFL-CIO, our coalition of We Are One Illinois, to address is retirement security and pensions. This isn't only a public employee problem. It's a problem with many people who aren't going to be in a position to retire when they're no longer able to work, right? Mm-hmm. And so that they want us to work on that, and that's what we're doing, and that's why it's the number one priority. The great news about this in terms of an organizing ability is is that Tier 2 members quickly realize what a raw deal they're getting. And so it kind of happens organically where they want to call their legislators. They want to show up at a rally. They want to be able to talk about this thing that is going to not provide them retirement security for them and their families when they get to that point where they're going to need to retire and no longer able to do the important work that our members do across the state.
Is there, I know the answer is probably yes, but I'll ask it as the best question I can. What's the cost? What's the dollar cost in making this shift?
So that's the issue, is that this is not inexpensive to do, right? And so the proposal that we had, there was some cost analysis done, and some people believe that the proposal that we put in the form of our legislative proposals might be higher than some people think that we're able to actually absorb right now. So that's what we're doing. We're working with the working groups, and we're sitting down and trying to figure out what can the state and local governments provide in terms of investments into their employees to provide retirement security. And we think we're going to be able to get to that solution before the General Assembly adjourns at the end of May. So literally every day we're in a room working to try to figure out exactly how to pay for these things. But here's the thing. The longer you wait, the more it costs and the less affordable it gets. They're going to have to fix part of this because we're like in violation of federal law in regards to Social Security requirements. Yeah. But they're also going to have to address the inability for state and local governments to recruit and retain employees once they figure out that this pension system that they're participating in are not going to provide the retirement security that most people need. And so we're just trying to figure that out in Springfield right now. And I'm confident, I'm cautiously optimistic that we're going to be able to get to a result by the end of May.
Yeah, and here's the thing, Pat, and I know you already realize this, with all the carnage and craziness that's taking place on a federal level, the last thing we need here in the state of Illinois, or any state, but certainly here in Illinois, is for these knuckleheads to get involved in being part of the solution, because we know their way of trying to solve it isn't going to be a solve. It's going to be further destruction of the importance of unions in general, but specifically here in the state. So I can feel your alarm bell in terms of how important it is that we get this resolved. Your staff has got to be pretty busy right now. You've got a great staff. Give a shout out to them. I know that they've been working really hard to make sure that you guys are on track.
Oh, we have an incredible staff. I know Alyssa Goodstein, our comms director, Francis Arenik, our legislative director, Samantha McLean, who's helping to lead this effort, our chief of staff, and all of our hardworking staff at the AFL-CIO. We are a lean operation, but we work very, very hard to make sure we're representing the interests of not only union members, all working people across the state. So thanks for acknowledging that. I really do appreciate it, because they do an incredible job each and every day.
Hey, man, I couldn't do this show without the engineers and the folks that we have here at WCPT. So I'm always about let's let the team know that we believe in and appreciate them and keep them propped up as well. Pat, we got to have you back again. I just don't know if it's going to be better to have you back before or after the middle or end of May, but we'll figure that out. But I'll make the commitment, and you make the commitment, that we do this again as we get closer to that time frame, because it's important that we keep listeners plugged into what you're doing. And so we'll figure that out. But thanks for being with us this morning, man. I really appreciate you bringing this conversation and the energy that's needed behind getting this resolved, and the union strength that we all have to get behind. So thanks for being with us, Pat.
Yeah, Richard, thank you so much for having me. And hopefully I'll be back in the beginning of June where we take a victory lap, where we take these big first steps of addressing this inequity. So thanks, man. Have a great day.
I will. Let's work on that for June. Be well, stay safe, and we'll be looking forward to our next time of having you on.
Same with you, bud.
Take care now. Bye now. All right, guys. Pat Devaney from AFL-CIO asked me, all of them put together. He's a leader in the space, as I will put it, of making sure that our public workers have the support and the energy that they need behind them. And it's an honor to have, and you heard him give a shout out to Stacey Davis Gates as his sister in this fight. I refuse to let the knuckleheads in Washington, D.C. Just roll over us. You know, that it doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but I refuse to. I'm going to take a page out of Senator Booker's book and fight. And that's what Pat's doing. That's what Ms. Gates is doing. That's what Tom Skilling's doing. You think about it. It's all about the greater good. None of the things that these three people that we had on today, Pat, Miss Gates, and Joan, is about anything other than fighting and fighting forward. And that's where they deserve the gold medal for today and the work that they're doing. Rather than take a break, why don't we see if we can squeeze in a couple of quick calls as we wrap up today? Let's go to Mike in Los Angeles. Mike, good morning and welcome to Choose Views. And by the way, Mike, thanks.
Great show again, buddy. How are you, man?
I'm good, man. Thanks for holding. I know we had our guest, but I wanted to get you in. What's going on today?
Hey, so is everybody aware of the demonstration tomorrow, Saturday, April 5th at Delhi Plaza, part of Indivisible? It's a nationwide demonstration across the country, and you go to indivisiblechicago.com. It's Progressive Democrats of America involved. There's all sorts of organizations. It's going to be big. It's nationwide. I don't know if it was mentioned the other day on your show.
I didn't get a chance to mention it, but here's what I'll tell you, Mike. I've had a handful of people that have sent me texts regarding it. So repeat that again for our listeners if you can.
IndivisibleChicago.com. It's 12 p.m. April 5th, Saturday at Delhi Plaza. You go to IndivisibleChicago.com.
Yeah, perfect. And listen, go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry. I keep cutting you off. Sorry.
So I made cold calls for Wisconsin and Florida through Progressive Democrats of America.
Yep.
And look, we won. I'm sorry, we won in Florida. We lost, but we won. We make up half the deficit from the last election.
I know.
It's incredible.
That's huge. That means folks are coming out. They're listening to what folks like you are doing on the ground. Folks are tired, and we've got to see, Mike. This is what I'm passionate about. We've got to keep throwing logs on this fire. Because the more when we just think about it, when there's darkness and you see light, you're drawn to the light. Would that be a fair statement? And that's what our protesting, our voices are doing. They're throwing logs on the fire and they're drawing people to the light. And that's what we have to do. So I appreciate you, brother. I know you're working hard.
Real quick, we won in rural Pennsylvania, like Lancaster. I'm from Philadelphia originally. That's amazing.
Yep.
And so they lost 4 referendums in Louisiana. That's amazing. Last word. Let's do it for the king and let's do it for Muhammad Ali, 2 of my heroes, man.
There you go.
Seriously, bro.
Mike, be well, man. Bro. It's good to hear your voice, and please stay safe, okay?
All right, man. Take it easy, buddy.
You too.
Great show.
Thank you. All right, real quick, guys. We're keeping it tight. Let's go to Andy in Rockford. Hey, Andy, good morning. I think you're probably about to talk about the same thing. What's going on?
Morning, Richard. I was listening Tuesday afternoon to the Jones show.
Okay.
She had a lady caller on that was a little upset with going to a Indivisible gathering. Her and her husband walked away a little disappointed. And it struck me that the previous Thursday I had gone to an Indivisible meeting in Rockford, and the first part of a 2-hour meeting was a presentation by a immigration attorney.
Mm-hmm.
This meeting was 100% geriatric Caucasian.
Yeah.
I didn't think that anybody in that meeting needed to worry about ICE coming to their door.
Well, and that's
midnight or something, you know.
And Andy, and that's the part where there's 2 sides of this conversation, and I have to be very careful in how I say this. Being involved and fighting is one thing, but there's a lot of people who are not crazy about getting out and being out in public to protest. And I go back and forth with that, not because I'm
one of them.
Yeah, and so I hear what you're saying, and that's why I wanted to get your call in, because there's some folks that are not quite down with, getting out and specifically being in public and fighting or protesting right now because of the concern, the physical potential concern that's there. And I see that, and I get a lot of text messages from people about it. And I won't say unfortunately, but practically Indivisible is one of the organizations in that conversation. So I hear you. I think my take on this, Andy, and thank you for your call this morning. Thanks for holding and being with us. my take on this is we have to continue to fight. But you do have to be mindful and pick where you're going to place that energy. And I'm not throwing any shade at Indivisible specifically. I'm saying that folks have to be mindful and careful with where they go. You just have to be. And and Andy didn't say it this way, but I think he may have been leaning this way. Folks of color particularly have got to be strategic in this space. And folks of the LGBTQ community have to be particularly strategic in this, because some of the organizations have become targets, bigger targets than others. And I say this respectfully, but with meaning. Indivisible is one of those groups, and that's just the reality of it. And Andy said it in his way in terms of, who was at this particular event. So just be mindful. Protests are necessary, but fighting can be done in other ways where you're not putting yourself in physical harm. And that's what I need to articulate so that people are clear about where we are in that. All right, let's go to one last caller before we wrap up. Let's go to Donna in Rogers Park. Good morning, Donna, and welcome to the show.
Good morning, Richard. I just wanted to thank Joan for going to that conference with Tom Skilling, because 3 weeks ago when she was out of town, she had a radio friend by the name of John that sat in for her, and Tom was his guest. And he and I were in college at the same time. I graduated in 78 when he started his career.
Yeah.
And I was so excited. It was like one of my life dreams to get a chance to just talk to him and thank him for really introducing weather, statistics, and education and information to the public, because I got excited about weather listening to Tom Skilling. He is, artificial intelligence is great, but nothing replaces a human being that's passionate about what they do. And every year we've got hotter, the weather is more erratic, and now is not the time to be making cuts, because with all the changes that are going on our planet, plus with all the political atmosphere and everything, we need professionals like Tom Skilling. And so cutting NOAA's budget is ridiculous. And even though Elon Musk might have a lot of money, but he lacks common sense and he lacks knowledge in all these different fields. So people have given Don, and not to cut you off, but just to ride along with what you're saying. People have given way too much credit to Elon Musk and his mental largesse. Oh, yeah. Way too much. And but see, this is something that, and I'll say this, and I'm gonna let you go because we got to wrap up the show, Donna. Thanks for your call. This is one of those times where. How do I say it than this? There's a lot of mediocre folks that don't look like me that are tearing down our country's support systems. When you have a Cory Booker that can stand up for 25 plus hours to wrap up the show and circle back to where I somewhat started, it's the folks that have protested and have fought, that have been out there on the front line, that are calling us to stay in the fight. That to me means you fight the way that's right for you, but don't not fight. I don't always agree with how it's done, but there still has to be a fight in all of us, and I'm a big believer in that. So I'm hoping that folks get that and understand the importance of it. Be mindful of what you do and how you do it, and get behind the people who you believe in. And the ones who are mediocre, you got to let them go, because those are the ones that are causing some of the biggest problems and harm right now in the country. And we've allowed way too long. People didn't pay attention when we said there's monsters in the closet. Now they're underneath the bed. And guess what? They just snatched the sheets off of you on a cold night. And that doesn't feel too good. So we've been telling you. We haven't been trying to tell you. We've been telling you. So this is a time where folks have got to pay attention, because you've missed the message before. But that being said, guys, it's always a pleasure to be here. Great guest today, and I hope that you guys will do what I always say. Let's take a deep breath and make your life count. We'll see you tomorrow.